Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another episode of D&D Horror Stories. In today's episode, we have a tale of a DM that ends a campaign before it even starts. A story about a DM making presumptions about a character, and more. But before we get into that, Ziggy has something to ask.
Recur das Rybird. Stroga Posiluista. Yay.
Thanks, Ziggy. I hope they do too. But now it is time to get into some D&D cringe. Why I, the DM, cancelled the game before it even started. By Reddit user, Zombie Teddy Bear. This one isn't as horrible as the others I've seen on here, but I think I dodged a bullet and saved myself from a lot of stress. I was looking to start DMing a new campaign, so I started looking for game groups on multiple platforms to see if anybody was in need. I find a post for a group of friends looking for someone to DM a game. Judging from what was posted, the vibe felt okay, so I sent a message. The person replied, we talked on Discord a bit, and everything was going well. I set up a Discord for the campaign, sent him the invite, and told him to get everyone else in so we could start talking and having a session 0. He tells me that he'll let everyone know, and we schedule a day and a time for the session 0. But he's the only one that shows up, and he tells me that he's at a wine tasting, so it'll have to be quick. He's very distracted throughout the call, though I try to power through, discussing expectations of the games, character creation, etc. I tell him everyone else still needs to join the Discord so we can go through character creation and backstories, and he tells me that he'll take care of it. I also set a firm start date for the campaign in hopes that it'll get everyone else in gear. It does not. And only one other person joins the Discord. They both send me character sheets that did not match the creation parameters I had set, and their backstories were wildly different from the setting. They clearly had a different game in mind, other than what was discussed. At this point, I'd had enough. I messaged the original person that it's not going to work, block them, close the Discord, and call it a day. Fortunately, I put together another group, and we've been going for about 1.5 years. Short, sweet, and to the point. I would say that OP made the right call here. The players didn't seem like they were that committed to the game, with not showing up to the Discord and making characters that didn't fit what OP had laid out. DMing for this group would have probably wound up being a huge waste of time. So kudos to OP for seeing the red flags before they could go any further. On to the next. You play a dramatic human bard in a colorful outfit? Must be a gay tiefling. By Reddit user, TA How to Unwelcome. Alternative title, How Not to Make a Player New to the Campaign Feel Welcome. I'm a lesbian, and I promise that this is, unfortunately, relevant. Some backstory that led me to this particular group of players. I had the itch to play D&D since quarantine began, but I had been too afraid to take the plunge into online sessions. I used to play at a table with my wife and our close friends, but that campaign fizzled out after DM wrote himself into a corner, and general life stuff happened. Retail jobs, adulting, what can you do? After finally kicking my social anxiety to the curb, and mustering up the courage to join a few D&D servers, I found a couple of games that interested me. So I went ahead and applied. This would be my first foray into 5e, and I was excited. I was accepted into 2 campaigns, the first of which I'm still in, and even running a campaign of my own for the same group. But this post isn't about the first campaign. This is about the second one. The game concept. The general game concept was that a group of longtime friends had to leave their village because of a prophecy which had the potential to change the world. It was promised to be roleplay heavy, which I was pretty excited about. After a preliminary voice call interview with the DM, current members of the group, and another potential member, I was feeling pretty good. The DM seemed chill, no one was homophobic at the mention of my wife, and everyone was pretty nice. The character pitch that got me accepted into the campaign was a human bard with a flair for the dramatic and a love of sleight-of-hand magic tricks to entertain the village's children. While not born in the village, he'd arrived as a child with his mentor, where the two performed in the town square to make a living. He was left behind while his mentor left on business, and upon finding out that they had to leave the village, he looked at the silver lining of being able to search for his missing mentor. Little did I know that the only part of that would stick with the DM would be the flair for the dramatic part, and the character's custom art, which featured a sunset celestial themed cape and some colorful headscarves. This takes a couple of sessions to rear its ugly head, but boy did it. The meat of the cringe. From the beginning, I was expected to be an integral part of this village and friends with the other player characters, despite not having access to their backstories or knowing anything about them. Okay, I could roll with that. I was confident enough in my role-playing abilities to handle improvising, and the first session went decent enough despite having been dropped into the campaign's third session, with the bare minimum information on the previous ones. I'm talking, not even a recap, levels of dropped in. Again, I could roll with that, and another new player was joining the same session. She played a tiefling cleric. There was some great roleplay between our characters. The cleric was anxious about being forced to leave the church she had grown up in, so my bard made her a flower crown from the church's garden, so she'd have a memento of home. And he did the same for the other characters. It was sweet. When I asked if I could add the crowns to our inventories, I was met with a very rude, "Haha, no." The problems began arising immediately after the first session ended. The cleric's player left the session, and the DM began to trash talk both the character and the player, while the other established players joined in. Like, the cleric had been gone for maybe 10 seconds before they started up. It happened that fast. At this point, I had spoken to this group a grand total of twice. They agreed to boot her from the campaign as I just sat in silence. I should have left after this first glaring red flag, but I was desperate to play D&D. By the time my second session with this group rolled around, things got worse. You know how some friends show affection by making off-color jokes at each other? The sort of jokes that could be seen as insults, were it not for the years of bonding everyone has gone through. Yeah, the DM was making those sort of jokes at me, despite me knowing them for a grand total of 2 weeks, and having only spoken to them a handful of times. Like, sorry man, you're not at a high enough friendship level to be making gay jokes about me and my wife, or to be making jokes about my insecurities. The jokes never veered into homophobic territory, but they were a little too close for comfort. These jokes aside, I was determined to try and stick it out. The roleplay was decent when the other players reciprocated. I spent a lot of time during these sessions feeling like I was the only one trying to roleplay or move the session forward. I'd say something, and there would be an extremely long silence before the DM would come in to try and railroad the party forward. This, unfortunately, happened a lot, with the worst instance detailed below. The party finally found the prophecy that got us kicked out of the village, and we learned that we would be hunted just for being mentioned in said prophecy. So life on the run began, and we had a destination in mind, the Earth Kingdom. Imagine, you're in a grassland with no discernible features. You've never left your village before, and have been forced to leave prematurely on the threat of death, and everyone knew why except for you. And they refused to tell you why, because you'll find out yourselves. You don't even have a map, and when you finally come across small stones in this vast expanse of grass, you think, hey, something man-made. This will lead us somewhere where we can get our bearings. Nope. The first hour of the third session was spent walking through an empty field, following something the DM put importance on, only for it to be revealed that they lead to nothing, and were leading us in the wrong direction. And that was a waste of a natural 20. We couldn't even know it was the wrong direction, because the DM had no world map, not even vague MS Paint scribbles, to show us, as players, where in the world things were located. So, not only were we left with the vaguest directions on where to go, or how the kingdoms were set up, but any attempt I made at roleplay was met with silence, as I, a bard, led the party in the wrong direction at the DM's insistence for an entire real-world hour. I was very nearly bored to tears and frustration, as I was the only one putting in effort, and I felt like a fool for having been led on by the DM and left feeling like my character was disliked by the party because there was zero attempt to roleplay in a roleplay-heavy campaign. We then found a nomadic village, where we had our first encounter with the sand assassins who were hunting us. After combat, our characters were all but chased away by the villagers, which the DM insisted was so emotionally difficult, even though the characters had only been there for about a day and a half. It was during this session that the jokes about my human bard being a K-tiefling started. Our characters had wanted posters that featured their general descriptions, and mine was solely focused on being a colorful, and therefore gay, tiefling. Everyone else's were pretty accurate, and they were elves and half-elves. But no, the human with easily identifiable features, the only person of color in a party of white elves, and clothing, is clearly a colorful tiefling. And every time we meet a new NPC who has knowledge about our situation, they say, "Oh, you're the gay tiefling." Every single time. Listen, I'll make gay jokes till the cows come home. My wife and I make them constantly. My friends and I make them all the time. Hell, even in my other group, I make the "I'm gay, I can't do math" meme on a regular basis, as I mess up adding up my damage rolls. 8 plus 4 does not equal 10. But I draw the line at these sorts of jokes being made at my expense by someone I barely know, or when all other aspects of my character are ignored because he has one gay stereotype in his personality. Non-horny bard who's confident in himself, tries to cheer up his friends in spite of their dire circumstances, would commit murder for them, and loves the art of performance because it makes people smile, but also because it's just fun. Nah, he's totally gay, and that's the only part of his character anyone the party comes across will focus on. Did I mention that my character never even flirted with anyone, male, female, or otherwise? The DM just incorrectly decided that my character was gay, and made every interaction revolve around that assumption, even though I constantly corrected him while reiterating that my bard was just a showman by nature, who enjoyed making people laugh with his antics. This DM also really wanted to give our characters emotional damage, and the following session was also spent trying to force us to feel, I don't even know, traumatized, powerless. Our characters lost an in-game year while inside some trial, and my bard's reaction was just, "Oh well, that kinda sucks. Maybe the assassins think we're dead. Cool." Spoiler alert, the assassins did not think we were dead, and knew exactly where we were, despite not having been seen for a year. I'm all for character growth, inner conflict, etc. But trying to force characters or players to feel something, or constantly trying to force emotional damage on characters ain't it. I know I've typed a lot, but imagine hearing it 6 times a session from the DM. And boy, did this DM try to force it. I lasted 4 or 5 sessions with that group, and after skipping once, because the thought of sitting through the railroaded emotional damage our characters were subjected to, the gay jokes, and hostile NPCs made me dread the idea of even playing with these people. I realized I was better off focusing on the other campaign I was in, so I left, and I regret not leaving after the first red flag at the end of the first session. Thanks for reading this train wreck of a post. Sorry it's long, but this took place over several sessions, and what I feel is relevant to the story, others might not. I hope you learn from my experience and avoid making the same mistake. To DMs and players welcoming someone new into their established campaigns, please get to know them before making mean-spirited personal jokes. It makes you come across as an asshole instead of welcoming. And don't reduce their character to a single stereotype. I'm begging you. Yeah, I'm sure it's frustrating to have a DM that not only railroads your party, but also wants to railroad how your character feels, acts, and NPC perception of them. It sounds like OP in no way played their character in a way that could be perceived as that stereotype. But the DM had it in their mind, so that's the way it was. I would also like to say that most gay people aren't this flamboyant stereotype that popular culture has portrayed. It seems like a lot of media just wants to put a character that's gay in their movies, shows, etc., that the main personality trait is gay. And I personally hate that shit. But I digress. I also agree with OP in that I'm all for trash talking with friends because it's just a way to bond. But when you meet someone new, hold up on that shit for at least a little while, because if you do it right away, it can come off as you just being an asshole. I think OP made the right call in leaving this campaign to concentrate on the other one. Remember, no D&D is better than bad D&D, and all that jazz. And before we get into the final story of the day, I just wanted to say that I hope you like the video as much as Simba likes playing with string. So remember to click that like button, as it really helps out a lot. But with that said, let's get to today's final story. My Father Was Left Unsupervised, by Reddit user Mandalorian Brat. I'm a 25-year-old female living in Florida, and the hurricane has kept us indoors for the past 3 days. My younger sister, 10, asked me to play D&D with her. She's never played, but I've told her some things about it. I called my brother of 20, and we waited for my dad, 48, to get home from work. He grumbled a bit about being forced to play, but didn't argue. He'd do just about anything for my sister. I walked my sister and brother through character creation on D&D Beyond, but mostly left my dad unsupervised. I made some basic statements like how to roll for stats and such, and we were starting with level 1 characters to keep it simple for them and me. I added my brother and sister's starting equipment, and asked my dad if he had finished his character. He had, and I asked to take a look. He had a 30 modifier to every single stat. He got to the money section and just kept pressing 9 until it wouldn't let him add any more coins. He had 1 billion platinum, 1 billion gold, silver, and copper. I protested this, and he simply said, "If it was against the rules, the website shouldn't have let me do it." I responded with, "You're level 1, you don't have 1 billion of any coin, let alone all of them." His response was, "I'm a dwarf. Dwarves mine gold and gems. I'm independently wealthy because I'm a dwarf." I then looked at his inventory. He had given himself 7 magic items, including a Staff of Thunder and Lightning, Gauntlets of Ogre Strength, and a Ring of Jumping. "Dwarves can't jump so good. I fixed that problem," he said. He also gave himself an Ancient White Dragon as a mount. "Dad, you can't have an Ancient White Dragon at level 1, I told him. "Yes, I can. My ancestor saved its life, and now it's indebted to my family. So even though I'm level 1, it serves me." I responded with, "That is not how white dragons work." And his answer was, "The website let me do it, so it's not against the rules." I was going to redo his character sheet, but my brother was laughing so hard, and my sister thought him owning a dragon was cool. We were in the middle of the hurricane, and bored out of our minds, so I let him keep his broken dwarf barbarian and his mithril scale armor. If you're wondering how the game went, my brother didn't like it too much because it didn't have any combat, as it was supposed to be a low combat, roleplay heavy homebrew campaign. Not really my brother's preference for D&D, which is fine. It was a bit hard to establish any consequences with my dad's dwarf being that OP, but this was a game for the lulz. The second I realized that and adjusted to it, we all had more fun. Now, I realize that this isn't really much of a horror story, but I found it amusing and wanted to share it. Besides, it's good to have some wholesomeness occasionally, amidst the ocean of actual horror stories I read in these videos. Sure, OP's dad did bend the actual rules, like, a lot. But at the end of the day, it sounds like everyone enjoyed themselves for the most part. And OP even stated in the comments of the post that after hearing the tale from her dad, her mom now wants to get into playing. A family that quests together stays together, and I hope OP and her family are well after going through the hurricane. And that's going to do it for today. Remember, if you have a story that you would like to be featured in a video, be sure to post it to the dndDoge subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.